The jungle exhales. Saipan, June 1944. Moist heat wraps itself around bare skin like a living thing. Dense, suffocating, inescapable. Beneath a roof of palms and volcanic rock, Japanese Lieutenant Colonel Takashi Hyakushi lifts a pair of German-made binoculars to his eyes. His fingers, bone-white on the metal, tremble slightly. Then he sees it, the moment he's been begging fate to deliver. American Marines. The same unstoppable tide that had crushed island after island, falling back. Dust swirls in their wake. Helmets bounce out of rhythm. Abandoned artillery sits silent on the ridge. Disorder. Hesitation. Panic. "They're retreating," he whispers, disbelief and relief blending in his voice. Around him, 3,000 weary Imperial Japanese Army soldiers tighten their grip on Arisaka rifles. They've starved. They've been shelled for weeks. They've watched their empire shrink, one coral beach at a time. But now, at last, the enemy looks human, beatable. Hyakushi raises his sword. "Banzai!" The cry explodes through the valley, ancient, furious, alive. Men surge forward, bayonets flashing in the tropical glare, convinced redemption is only a few steps away. None of them see the still-hidden machine gun nests, the zeroed mortar sights, the artillery crews silently waiting for coordinates. They charge toward what looks like victory and straight into geometry. If the art of unseen strategy fascinates you, the deceptions that reshape the wars of men, stay close, because what follows change the meaning of retreat forever. To understand it, you must first understand the island. Saipan lies in the heart of the Marianas, 1,500 miles south of Tokyo. Close enough for American B-29 superfortresses to strike the home islands. Whoever commanded Saipan commanded the throat of Japan's defense line. It wasn't simply a piece of land, it was survival itself. By mid-1944, the United States had spent 2 brutal years clawing across the Pacific in what historians would later call island hopping. Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Kwajalein, each name carved into memory with blood. Every battle taught the same cruel lessons. Never underestimate a Japanese defense, never expect surrender, and never, ever rush a fortified position. But the Marines learned something else too. They learned how to read their enemy. Japanese doctrine worshipped the offensive. Bushido demanded attack, not retreat. Defense was tolerated only as a prelude to counterattack. That belief, that pride, became a weakness. American Lieutenant General Holland "Howlin' Mad" Smith recognized it. If the Japanese couldn't resist chasing a retreating foe, then retreat itself could be turned into a weapon. Could such a deception hold together under real fire? That question would soon decide thousands of lives. In the belly of the USS Rocky Mount, the air was thick with sweat, cigarette smoke, and the weight of impossible math. General Holland "Howlin' Mad" Smith bent over a map of Saipan, a chaotic patchwork of jungle, ridges, and volcanic teeth. Around him, his officers spoke in low, careful voices, each sentence balancing strategy against sacrifice. Intelligence claimed 30,000 Japanese troops held the island, burrowed deep into positions they'd spent months perfecting. Every cave a bunker, every ridge a fortress. A frontal assault would grind the Marines into the soil. Smith's jaw tightened. "We need another way," he said. It was Colonel William O'Brien, a survivor of Guadalcanal, who broke the silence. "What if we make them think we're running?" The room stilled, not retreating in chaos, but withdrawing in perfect control, carefully messy, deliberately uncoordinated, just convincing enough to lure the enemy out. To most officers, the idea sounded like blasphemy. Military doctrine was clear. You hold ground, you do not yield it. Even pretending to was a stain on honor. But Smith saw the deeper truth. Pride kills as efficiently as bullets. If the Japanese mindset demanded counterattack, then that instinct could be baited, turned against them. The withdrawal wouldn't be surrender, it would be camouflage for annihilation. The rehearsals began in absolute secrecy. On a remote stretch of Guadalcanal Beach, Marines practiced the impossible, chaos by choreography. Every step of the fallback was timed. Too fast and it would become a real rout. Too slow, and the illusion would fail. Each man learned where to drop, where to scatter equipment, where to feign panic without losing formation. Artillery crews memorized kill zones drawn in red circles on maps. Mortar teams buried their positions beneath palm fronds, sighting overlapping fields of fire. Offshore, destroyers aligned their guns to pre-selected targets. Every element had to move as one heartbeat. If any unit broke rhythm, the entire deception would crumble. Even the medics had their part, waiting in fallback trenches, ready to drag the wounded away before they broke the illusion. Radio men tested backup frequencies for when the main lines inevitably went silent. The entire operation depended on seconds. Too early, the Japanese wouldn't take the bait. Too late, and the Marines would be swallowed alive. The hardest part wasn't timing. It was faith. Each Marine had to believe their officers weren't actually panicking, that the retreat was theater, not disaster. A single real act of fear could shatter the entire illusion. In war, the distance between brilliance and catastrophe is often measured in moments, and this plan would depend on the most fragile thing a soldier can have: trust. June 15, 1944. Dawn rose over Saipan in flashes of thunder and steel. From offshore battleships, naval guns spoke in steady rhythm, shaking the sea itself. At first light, 8,000 Marines stormed the beaches, faces streaked with salt, sand, and fear. Shells screamed overhead. Machine gun fire hissed from the cliffs. The surf turned red, and the air filled with the scent of cordite and burned coral. They clawed forward, inch by inch, over jagged reefs, through black volcanic sand, under a curtain of bullets. By afternoon, a beachhead 3 miles deep was theirs, but beyond it lay a nightmare. The interior of Saipan was a labyrinth. Ridges of volcanic rock, dense jungle, coral caves carved into fortresses. Japanese artillery rained down from Mount Tapochau, the island's spine. Snipers nested in palm trees, in rock faces, even in the shadows of their own dead. Every 100 yards cost blood. For 3 days, the Marines pushed inland, battered but unbroken. Each night came the same terror: Japanese banzai charges. Thousands of men screaming through the dark, crashing into American lines in human waves. Some broke through. Most died trying. General Smith waited. He was watching for the pattern. The enemy was close to breaking, but not yet desperate enough. The trap demanded arrogance, the kind that blinds commanders to danger. On June 18th, intelligence scouts reported massing forces near the Tanapag Plain. The Japanese were preparing a massive counterattack. Smith nodded once. The stage was ready. At 1600 hours, June 19th, the order went out. Phase red, execute withdrawal. On the forward ridge, Marine sergeants passed the message quietly: pull back, keep your weapons, leave the rest. Private First Class Daniel Chen, a young radio man from San Francisco, felt his stomach twist into knots. Every instinct screamed this was wrong. You don't retreat from ground you bled for. But his lieutenant's voice stayed calm. Easy, Danny. This is part of the play. Across the valley, through Japanese binoculars, it looked perfect. Disorder. Helmets bobbing out of sync, abandoned artillery, crates of ammo scattered like panic made real. Lieutenant Colonel Hyakushi watched in disbelief, then delight. His observers confirmed what he already saw. The Americans were running. He didn't know that every abandoned gun was sabotaged, that every ammo crate marked a kill zone, that every step of the Marine retreat had been measured, rehearsed, and mapped to coordinates of death. Hyakushi saw weakness. The Marines saw calculation. Both were right in their own way. The Japanese advance began with precision. Officers shouting orders, soldiers moving in tight formation. For the first 100 yards, discipline held. Then the illusion deepened. Marines started running faster, stumbling, dropping rifles. Discipline broke, momentum took over. Weeks of starvation, bombing, and humiliation ignited into frenzy. Someone screamed the ancient word, "Banzai!" The cry spread like fire. 3,000 men surged forward, bayonets flashing, faces lit by rage and hope. They saw victory. They were running straight into hell. Chen heard the roar behind him. His radio crackled with static. How long? He whispered. His lieutenant checked his watch. Sweat dripped from his chin. 20 seconds. 20 seconds until the trap closed, an eternity and an instant. The whistle cut through the jungle like a blade. In that instant, the illusion shattered. Marines who had been retreating dropped to the ground in unison, taking cover behind pre-marked rocks and embankments. Camouflage nets flew aside. Hidden Browning machine guns came alive, spitting fire at 500 rounds a minute. The first ranks of charging Japanese soldiers were erased in seconds. Tracer rounds stitched through bodies and foliage alike, painting streaks of light through the smoke. Behind them, mortar teams fired in perfect rhythm, shells arcing overhead, falling into dense clusters of men. Each explosion tore the air apart, showering shrapnel and screams. The sound was beyond chaos. It was organized thunder. From the sea, Navy spotters aboard the USS Indianapolis relayed coordinates with calm precision. Target bracketed, fire for effect. 3 cruisers adjusted their guns, and seconds later the earth convulsed. 260-pound shells ripped through the jungle, vaporizing trees and flesh alike. Each salvo walked forward, closer and closer to the heart of the Japanese charge. Lieutenant Colonel Hayakushi stood among the madness, still clutching his binoculars. For a heartbeat, he couldn't comprehend it. The machine guns that hadn't existed moments ago. The artillery falling with impossible accuracy. Then realization struck. This wasn't combat. This was execution. He tried to shout orders, retreat, regroup, anything. But his voice drowned beneath the roar. His men ran in every direction, forward into bullets, backward into mortars, sideways into the path of naval shells. There was no escape. The valley had become a machine built for death. Interlocking arcs of fire. Geometry turned to slaughter. Japanese soldiers tried to stand their ground, to fight with honor, but honor meant nothing in the face of mathematics. Those who faltered were cut down by their own officers, desperate to enforce Bushido discipline, even as the world ended around them. Hayakushi died seconds later, torn apart by shell fire, still gripping his binoculars. A man who had mistaken the oldest trick in war for victory. Sun Tzu had written it centuries before. Feign disorder and crush them. Hayakushi had read the words. He just never expected to die inside them. 18 minutes. That's how long it took for the jungle to fall silent again. When it was over, nearly 2,800 Japanese soldiers lay dead or dying. American casualties, 43. The math was as cold as it was perfect. Private Daniel Chen crouched behind a volcanic boulder, hands still trembling on his radio. He heard none of it anymore, just the echo of gunfire fading into a ringing void. No triumph, no horror, only emptiness. As the smoke cleared, artillery crews finished their fire missions. Mortar tubes glowed red. The Navy guns went quiet. The jungle that had roared with rage minutes before now whispered again. And 2,800 men would never whisper with it. The trap had worked with mechanical precision. War had become a science experiment in death. At dawn, General Smith walked the ridge where his Marines had staged their false retreat. Below him, the battlefield looked like a map of human ruin, bodies scattered in patterns that told a story of geometry and hubris. The densest clusters lay in the kill zone's center. Smaller groups marked where some had almost escaped. A few corpses lay alone, men who had crawled until they bled out. Medics moved quietly among the wreckage, checking for signs of life. There were almost none. Most Japanese soldiers had chosen death over capture, some pulling grenades close, others using their last bullet. Smith's aide approached. "Sir, the press wants a statement." Smith looked out over the valley. What could he say? That retreat had become the sharpest weapon in the American arsenal? That pride had been used to slaughter the proud? He exhaled slowly. "Tell them," he said, "we used the enemy's strength against him." There was nothing more to add. The operation's code name, False Withdrawal, spread through the Marine Corps like wildfire. Commanders across the Pacific studied it, adapted it, and copied it. Manuals were rewritten, training programs updated. The fake retreat became standard doctrine. It appeared again at Tinian, then at Peleliu, later at Okinawa. Even when Japanese officers knew about the deception, they couldn't resist the instinct. The culture of attack ran too deep. Knowledge didn't save them. Pride overpowered logic every time. American intelligence intercepted messages from surviving Japanese units. Some officers raged at the dishonorable tactics. Others admired them secretly. The debate was philosophical. The outcome was factual. But false withdrawal wasn't just another tactic. It was a revelation, a new kind of warfare. Psychology had become a weapon. Understanding how your enemy thought was now as lethal as firepower. Technology, radio, artillery, naval coordination had turned ancient deception into industrialized annihilation. General Smith received medals, praise, and promotions. But in letters to his wife, he confessed a different feeling. "We won through cleverness," he wrote. But cleverness in war means making men die for doing exactly what they were trained to do. The fake retreat saved lives, American lives, by the thousands. Yet it also left a shadow, because once you realize how predictable human nature can be, how easily it can be manipulated, it becomes impossible not to see the horror beneath the brilliance. Saipan fell on July 9, 1944. The battle raged for 3 weeks. The fake retreat was just one act, but its echo lasted for generations. From Saipan's airfields, American B-29 bombers soon rose into the skies, carrying fire toward Tokyo. The island became the launch point for devastation, and for many who fought there, victory turned bitter. Marines who had cheered the triumph later saw civilians leaping from cliffs rather than surrender. Parents clutching children, grenades in trembling hands. Private Chen went home with medals and silence. He never told his family about those 18 minutes. Historians would later call it a masterpiece of tactics, a flawless example of turning enemy psychology into a weapon. The textbooks called it Saipan, 1944. Understanding cultural doctrine as vulnerability. But for the men who lived it, the lesson was far darker. War's greatest genius isn't invention. It's understanding how predictable we are, and how easily that can be used to destroy us. Today, Saipan is quiet. The jungle has reclaimed the scars. Tour guides walk the ridges where Marines once faked their retreat, pointing to the ground where 3,000 men believed in victory and found death instead. The jungle breathes again, and beneath its calm, the echo of deception still lingers, proof that in war the deadliest weapon is not steel or fire, but understanding.